In Detroit in January 1989, Toyota unveiled a large sedan wearing a badge nobody recognized. It read, Lexus. The company behind it was known in America for building the Corolla. Then the press walked up and read the window sticker, and the mood on the show floor changed because the car was priced at roughly half of a comparable Mercedes-Benz S-Class. But the sticker was never the real weapon. So how did a company with no luxury history at all leave Mercedes-Benz and BMW rewriting their flagship sedans within 2 years? 6 years earlier, Toyota had nothing a wealthy American would have parked in a Beverly Hills driveway. Toyota sold economy cars, and it sold them well. Its home market flagships, the Crown and the Century, were built for Japanese executives and rarely left Japan. In American showrooms, a Toyota badge meant a dependable commuter and a sensible monthly payment. There was also a wall standing in Toyota's way, and it was built out of politics rather than engineering. Japanese brands had been taking a widening share of the United States market through the fuel crisis years. And in 1981, Washington and Tokyo settled on a cap limiting how many Japanese cars could be shipped in each year. If the number of cars is fixed, the only variable left is what each one is worth. Honda reached that conclusion first and launched Acura in 1986, and Nissan was already working on Infiniti. Toyota was going further than either of them. In August 1983, Toyota chairman Eiji Toyota gathered a small group of executives and asked them one question. Could Toyota build a luxury car capable of challenging the very best in the world? Everyone at that table understood which cars he was pointing at, and nobody thought it was a small ask. The best in the world had two addresses: the Mercedes-Benz factories outside Stuttgart and the BMW works in Bavaria. Those two owned the top of the market so completely that Toyota's question sounded less like a business plan than a dare. What he authorized next still catches people off guard, because it isn't how car companies work. It received a code name, F1, standing for Flagship Number 1. It received a chief engineer, a veteran named Ichiro Suzuki, who had spent 25 years inside Toyota, and it received something almost no car program in history is given, which was a development effort with no budget ceiling and no deadline. But the detail that mattered most wasn't the money. It was the target sheet. Instead of beginning with sketches or clay, Suzuki began with a list of numbers the finished car had to beat, and every number belonged to a German competitor. Cabin noise had to stay under 58 decibels at 60 miles per hour. The car had to run past 155 flat out while returning no worse than roughly 22 miles per gallon. And it needed a drag coefficient of 0.29, which would make it slipperier through the air than the S-Class or the 7 Series. Any one of those numbers on the target sheet is achievable on its own. Trouble is, they're fighting each other. A quiet cabin usually means a heavy car, and weight ruins economy, while a slippery shape means a low roof that ruins cabin space. Suzuki refused to trade any of them away. All of the numbers at the same time in one car. That decision made everything expensive. Nothing on the F1 project could be borrowed from the Toyota parts bin because those parts hadn't been engineered anywhere near this standard. The V8 didn't exist yet, so they built one. 900 experimental engines went onto test stands before the 4-liter unit that became the one UZFE was signed off. Its governing target was smoothness rather than peak horsepower or torque, defined as the absence of any vibration reaching the cabin, and it shaped decisions down to the smallest moving parts. But the target sheet was the cheap part. The cost of the F1 project showed up in how many finished cars Toyota was prepared to destroy, and in how many people it put on the problem. 60 designers were assigned alongside 1,400 engineers in 24 separate teams, 2,300 technicians, and a couple of hundred support staff. Roughly 450 running prototypes were built and destroyed, covering 1.7 million miles on German autobahns, desert highways, and gravel roads. Some sat out in the Arizona sun for 3 months with the windows down to see what the interior would look like afterward. So the factory was rebuilt to match the car. Production was assigned to the Tahara plant in southern Japan, where Toyota rebuilt the welding line, the casting shop, and the assembly hall to hold tolerances it had never attempted before. Even the paint went on in 5 coats, mixed so the color shifted as the light moved. Styling went through 8 formal reviews. Early proposals were sharper-nosed and lower, closer to a coupe than a limousine, and all were rejected in favor of something more conservative. A first-running prototype was completed in July 1985. In May 1986, a fleet of disguised prototypes was turned loose on the German Autobahn, running alongside the exact cars they were built to beat. Concept approval came in February 1987. The production design was frozen in May of that year, nearly 4 years after Toyota had first asked his question. More than 100 cars were destroyed in crash testing before a single customer took delivery. I mean, think about that for a second. A typical program signs off a shape after 5 or 6 full-size clay models. Suzuki demanded 14. He is also said to have collected as many production car keys as he could obtain, because the key is the first piece of the car an owner touches. The team tested 24 kinds of wood over 2 years before choosing one, and the trim was cut by Yamaha, the piano maker. Now, there was one more piece of homework at Toyota that mattered more than any of the engineering. In 1985, a small Toyota team moved into Laguna Beach, California, and simply watched. They studied what wealthy Californians drove, where those cars were parked, and how the owners spent their weekends. Members of the team sat in focus groups, interviewed dealers in the major markets, and listened to the complaints that customers made after the sale rather than before it. What came back wasn't a request for more horsepower or more walnut. It was frustration with the way owners were treated once the money had changed hands, with service departments that behaved as though the privilege ran in one direction only. Toyota wrote that down and treated it as an engineering specification, which is a strange thing to do with a feeling. By November 1988, the car finally had a name, LS400, for luxury sedan and 4 liters. Toyota had also spent months in court because a legal research company argued that Lexus sounded far too much like its own product, Lexus. Then came Detroit. The LS400 rolled onto the North American International Auto Show floor in January 1989, alongside a smaller companion sedan, the ES250. Journalists walked around a car that looked, frankly, a little familiar. The proportions echoed the W126 S-Class. The grille was conservative, and nothing about the shape shouted for attention. The specification sheet is where it stopped being polite. 250 horsepower from a brand new V8, balanced so precisely that Toyota engineers used it as a party trick. It would run to 155 on the Autobahn without complaint. It slipped through the air more cleanly than either German rival. Toyota flew American journalists to Germany and let them hold the LS400 at Autobahn speed while talking normally in the back seat. Inside the cabin, the equipment list read like answers to questions nobody had thought to ask a car company. The dials lit up in a way no other car on the road could match. The steering wheel moved itself aside when the driver opened the door, and the automatic gearbox shifted so quietly that passengers had trouble telling when it changed gear. In Japan, that identical car was sold through Toyota dealers as the Celsior, which tells you how much confidence Toyota had in the hardware underneath the badge. Full production began at Tahara in May 1989, and the first cars reached American customers on the 1st of September. But none of that was the number that did the damage. The price was roughly $35,000, while a comparable Mercedes-Benz sedan sat in the 60s, with some configurations pushing past 70. Reviews landed somewhere close to disbelief. Writers who had spent careers defending German engineering were reporting that a first attempt from Japan rode more quietly and cost tens of thousands less. Nearly all went looking for the catch. What came back was a complaint about character, that the car was competent everywhere and thrilling nowhere, and that it drove with all the personality of a kitchen appliance, a criticism that would follow Lexus for years. Now, Toyota could have simply let the reviews do the work. They did not. Team One, the agency handling the launch, built a commercial called Balance. A pyramid of champagne glasses was stacked on the hood of an LS400, while the engine was run all the way up to the equivalent of 145 miles per hour. Not one glass moved, and not a drop was spilled. Rival marketing departments assumed the footage was faked, since no production V8 they had measured behaved that way, so an independent firm verified the run. If you're enjoying this, subscribe. I dig into automotive history like this every week. By late 1989, the LS400 was actually reaching customers, and the second half of Toyota's plan started operating. So what happens when a promise carved into granite collides with an actual defect? Roughly 1,600 dealers applied for a Lexus franchise. 81 were selected. Each had to build a facility to a standard nobody in the retail car business had been asked to meet, and each had to sign a document called the Lexus Covenant, written by General Manager Dave Illingworth and carved into a block of granite at the company's California headquarters. It committed the brand to treating each customer as a guest in the dealer's own home. Those dealers signed it before any of them had so much as driven the car. That pledge on the granite block looked like marketing language at the time. It wasn't. On the 4th of December, 1989, Lexus announced a recall of every LS400 in owner and dealer hands, all 8,000 of them. There were 3 faults on the list, one in the cruise control, one in a rear light, and one in the wiring behind the dashboard. And the timing? 2 months after launch, with the launch reviews still on newsstands. Here's the part that made the story travel. Lexus had received roughly 1 owner complaint about the cruise control, 1 about the brake light, and 4 about the wiring. Out of 8,000 cars, any rival brand would have handled that quietly through a service bulletin sent to its dealers. So why didn't Lexus? Instead, dealers telephoned each owner individually. Cars were collected from driveways and offices, loaners were left at no charge, and each car came back washed and with a full tank of fuel. Owners more than 100 miles from a dealership didn't have to go anywhere because a technician was sent to their home. In smaller markets, Lexus flew extra technicians in to clear the backlog. Illingworth later explained the reasoning without any drama. They looked at the covenant they had all signed and decided that if they were who they claimed to be, there was only one course of action available. Every one of those early buyers then went to work at dinner parties and golf clubs, telling other luxury car owners what had just happened to them. That was the moment the German companies had a genuine problem, and it didn't come from the engineering. But the sales charts were only the surface of it. The numbers arrived fast. Lexus moved more than 42,000 LS400s in its first year. Mercedes-Benz United States sales fell by roughly 19% in 1990, then fell again by about 24% the year after. BMW went from close to 97,000 American sales in 1986 to somewhere near 53,000 in 1991. Vic Doolan, brought in around then to run BMW sales and marketing, later admitted the range simply hadn't been living up to the company's own advertising. In 1991, Lexus became the top-selling luxury import brand in the United States, ahead of both Mercedes-Benz and BMW. The same year, it took the top position in 3 separate J.D. Power studies covering initial quality, sales satisfaction, and overall customer satisfaction. A car brand 2 years old was now the benchmark that Stuttgart and Munich were being measured against. So, how did Stuttgart answer? Badly, as it happened. The next S-Class, internally the W140, had been in development for years. As the Lexus data came in, Mercedes engineers were pushed into a round of late changes, adding weight, complexity, and cost to a car that was already the most over-engineered sedan the company had ever attempted. Development chief Wolfgang Peter had warned about the delays and the overruns. He lost his job after the launch anyway. The W140 arrived in 1991 as a magnificent object and a commercial headache. Its American launch price landed near $72,000. By 1992, a six-cylinder version was listed at just over $70,000, while a Lexus LS 400 across the street was about $44,000. Buyers noticed, and they weren't sentimental about it. Its predecessor, the W126, had sold more than 800,000 units. Its W140 replacement managed roughly 433,000 across a longer production run. But the deeper consequence was philosophical. Mercedes-Benz had built its reputation on letting engineers decide when a car was finished. After the Lexus years, the company moved toward market-led design, where accountants set the target and engineering worked backward. Enthusiasts have argued about that trade ever since, usually while pointing at the build quality of the models that came later. Now, Munich reacted differently. BMW had already begun work on the third-generation 7 Series, the E38, and the Lexus arrival landed in the middle of that program. Its rear suspension was thrown out and redesigned from scratch, and ride comfort moved up the priority list to sit beside handling. When the E38 appeared in 1994, it was arguably the most complete car BMW had ever built. Both German firms also rebuilt their dealer training and service processes because that was the fight they had actually lost. So does that make it a clean victory? Not quite. There were things Toyota couldn't manufacture, and image was the obvious one. British and European reviewers of the era kept landing on the same observation, that the LS 400 could match the Germans on any specification you could measure, and still couldn't deliver the thing a chairman wanted when he handed his keys to a valet. Its companion car didn't help. The ES250 was a Camry in formal wear, and reviewers said so from the first week. Toyota had promised a new standard, then parked a rebadged family sedan next to the one car that actually delivered it. That wasn't lost on anybody. Currency moved as well. That $35,000 sticker had been set deliberately low, and a strengthening yen dragged the price upward year after year. Within 3 years, the LS 400 was a $44,000 car, which quietly closed some of the gap the Germans had been unable to close themselves. So did the Germans ever get it back? In part, yes. Lexus led the American luxury market for 11 consecutive years, then lost the crown in 2011 to BMW and Mercedes-Benz. In 2025, BMW finished first in the American market, Lexus took second, and Mercedes-Benz came in third. The gap between the top two brands was under 20,000 cars. Lexus still tops customer satisfaction rankings among luxury brands in the United States, which is exactly the ground it claimed in 1989 and has never really surrendered, which leaves a stranger question than the one we opened with on that Detroit show floor. The interesting thing isn't whether Lexus won, because the American sales charts have swung back and forth for 30 years since. What matters is that a company with no standing in the segment forced two of the most confident manufacturers on Earth to open up their own cars and ask whether the old assumptions still held. So the S-Class that came after the W140 was built by a different Mercedes. A 7 Series followed the E32 that was engineered by a different BMW. Somebody stacked champagne glasses on a hood in a rented studio, and the whole top of the industry moved. Next week, I'm taking apart what happened inside Stuttgart during the cost-cutting years that followed, and why owners of certain 1990s Mercedes models are still paying for those decisions. Subscribe so you catch it.